LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the January 6th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Happy New Year. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's 14 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. My political comedy source, because there's no Saturday Night Live or Bill Maher for another couple weeks, will be a little joke about Trump's wall from AM Joy. It's sort of a political analysis joke, so that'll be the first clip I'm showing you on the main topic, No Trump Wall. It's another episode of the Trump reality show on the Trump Shutdown, where maybe Trump is trying to misdirect us from some other news. Adam Schiff, I'll have a clip of Adam Schiff at the very end talking about what some of that other news might be that we're being misdirected from. But almost all the other clips will be about the negotiations for Trump's big, beautiful wall across the southern border and what is going on with that and whether the government is going to continue being shut down. And then I'll have my news analysis clips from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. You can also follow along my list of 14 clips. There's a link down in the video description to my clip list and my sort of cryptic notes if you want to see where each clip comes from, who's talking in each clip, the general topic of what the clip is. And, well, I guess I should probably just get right to it. And hopefully I've been a little delayed by power outages. There's a big storm here. I'll show you. So stormy that the cat would not go outside in the Dash and Sandy clip I'll show you at the end. So hopefully the power won't go out and I'll be able to finish the show after. This is Trump's wall, according to this New York Times story, was never supposed to be an actual policy. It was a mnemonic device which leads Joy Reid on AM Joy this morning to theorize about what would have happened if previous presidents had insisted on billions of dollars to fulfill their metaphorical campaign promises that I will talk about with you after we watch that clip together over here.
That, according to his own former advisors, as reported by the New York Times, was not even a real thing. It was, instead, a mnemonic device that Roger Stone made up so that the candidate, who hated to read, would remember to bash immigrants during his campaign stops. A wall that Donald Trump is clearly afraid to walk away from, because now that he's said it so many times at his campaign rallies, where he also said Mexico would pay for it, members of the right-wing media won't let him walk away. And he can't risk losing them or his political base, lest he have to face potential impeachment or maybe even indictment without them. But think about that just for a minute. We are now in the 16th day of a government shutdown over a memory device, a totally made-up piece of campaign rhetoric. It would be like Bill Clinton shutting down the government over a demand to build a literal physical bridge to the 21st century. Or Barack Obama shutting it down because he wanted $5 billion earmarked for Yes We Cans. There appears to be no end.
$5 billion for Yes We Cans. That's basically what Donald Trump is insisting on, or if Bill Clinton had wanted his bridge to the 21st century be a literal bridge. I don't know. That it's kind of a joke, but that's what our presidency has come to. And if you actually looked at the thumbnail for my video, Trump has kind of made a joke out of it. He's used this Game of Thrones meme, like the wall is coming. Of course, as several people pointed out, including AM Joy in a clip that I didn't take because I was worried it'd have too many copyright problems. They showed the destruction of the wall in Game of Thrones at the end of the last Game of Thrones series. So there was some dragon action on AM Joy this morning, too. Anyway, I thought that was kind of amusing. I hope you enjoyed the political comedy clip, such as it was, until we get real political comedy back in another couple weeks. And now I'm going to go to the actual news. I have news summaries from all five of the big five corporate outlets, all about the shutdown, about the wall, about some of the consequences of the shutdown. The best news summary, except for a couple little details I'll talk about later, definitely came from Meet the Press. It's the longest of the news summaries. It's over almost 4.5 minutes. Only Fox News Sunday had a news summary that was over a minute, other than NBC's Meet the Press, and those will be the two bookends with some 3 quick news summaries from ABC, CNN, and CBS in the middle. But here's the Meet the Press news summary, the new year, and Chuck Todd telling us that the shutdown is not only 16 days long, but because of the new year, it's gone into its second year, which I thought was maybe a little bit too much. And I'll tell you another detail that might be missing from this news summary after we watch it together over here.
And welcome to our first Meet the Press of the new year. The government shutdown is now in its 16th day and, well, second year, tying it for the third longest in history, and the problems for everyone are piling up, literally. Though national parks are open, they are not staffed, which means a lot of places are beginning to look like this. In addition, the federal food stamp program, which services 38 million low-income Americans, faces severe cuts, and some $140 billion in tax refunds. Your money could be frozen or delayed. For Democrats who were once willing to provide wall funding, the goal now seems to be to deny President Trump a victory, any victory. And for the president, the wall has become a symbol. It's no longer just about keeping illegal immigrants out. It's about keeping his base in. Senator Lindsey Graham made that point clear on Fox earlier this week.
If he gives in now, that's the end of 2019 in terms of him being an effective president. That's probably the end of his presidency.
We have critical players from all corners of this drama. President Trump's acting chief of staff, who's negotiating for the White House, the House Majority Leader, a Democratic negotiator, and a moderate Republican senator who's up for re-election in 2020, who's caught in the middle. It's a staring contest in which neither the president nor the Democrats see an incentive to blink, because each views this shutdown as a political winner and necessity for them.
I'm very proud of doing what I'm doing. I don't call it a shutdown.
With the government shut down in its third week, President Trump is digging in.
He said he'd keep the government closed for a very long period of time, months or even years.
Absolutely, I said that. I don't think it will, but I am prepared.
President Trump said Friday that if Democrats don't give him $5.6 billion for a border wall, he can use emergency powers to divert Pentagon funds.
We could call a national emergency and build it very quickly, and it's another way of doing it. But if we can do it through a negotiated process, we're giving that a shot.
The president's latest threats come as he is boxed in and grasping for an off-ramp that will not alienate conservative media and the political base he needs for fights ahead.
You Republicans got to stay the course. You can't back down. Now, the president's base is now deeply invested in this shutdown. The president has taken a stand, and it's time for the Republicans to do the same.
In December, the president rejected a short-term spending bill passed by the Senate after it was panned by immigration hawks.
We set out a number, $5.6 billion. We're very firm on a number.
Still, some Republicans who face tough re-election fights are pleading with the president to end the shutdown, wall or no wall.
Let's get the government open and have a debate that the American people can be proud of.
Meanwhile, some allies of the president have floated a short-term plan to grant work permits to so-called dreamers in exchange for the wall funding.
Give President the $5 billion we need for wall/border security as a down payment to securing the border. The DACA population, about 700,000, give them work permits.
But it's not clear the president will support it or what incentive House Democrats, buoyed by their new majority,
I extend to you this gavel.
would have to accept that offer.
Is there any situation in which you would accept even $1 of wall funding for this president in order to reopen the government?
$1? $1. A wall is an immorality. It's not who we are as a nation.
Democrats have to worry about their own grassroots. This week, freshman Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Michigan revived the debate over impeachment after these comments were caught on tape.
We're going to go in there, we're going to impeach them.
I don't like that language. I wouldn't use that language. I don't, again, establish any language standards for my colleagues. But I don't think it's anything worse than what the president has said.
But in exit polling, 71% of Democrats supported impeachment. So it may not be a question of whether impeachment proceedings begin, but when.
I stand by impeaching the president of the United States. I ran on that.
Democratic and Republican negotiators are supposedly planning to meet again today after yesterday's meeting. In the words of President Trump, it didn't make much headway. I sat down with the president's acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, shortly after those talks on Saturday broke up, and began by asking him why so little progress was made.
And I'll have a clip of Mick Mulvaney, both from NBC's Meet the Press and also from CNN's State of the Union, where actually both the interviews, I think, took place yesterday. Neither one was live, and both on wall topics. But like I said, I thought that was a good news summary for Meet the Press. I don't know if the three perspectives they picked out were like, those are like the three sides on the shutdown. It's Mick Mulvaney representing the Trump administration, and then Steny Hoyer, who's the House Majority Leader, second in command to Nancy Pelosi, and then Susan Collins, moderate Republican from the Senate. Are those the three sides? I don't know if that might not be such a great tripartite, but I am going to show you those three clips. Those are the first three clips I'm going to show you after the news summary. Oh, and then the Sarah Huckabee Sanders clip where Chris Wallace actually does, well, a pretty good job of cross-examining her. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself on that clip. The one thing kind of missing from there is they talk about impeachment, but they didn't really talk about the Mueller investigation or what the substance of those investigations might be. I mean, it was almost 4.5 minutes long. That might be a good summary for what's coming up in 2019, and that's actually emphasized slightly more on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos in a news summary that was less than a minute long. One of the three news summaries that are all less than a minute long. I'm going to show you from ABC, CNN, and CBS now all in a row. Here's the ABC news summary, also about the shutdown mainly, but also House investigations, Mueller investigations, all making Trump's life difficult in this clip.
Good morning and welcome to a new year on This Week. As we start this new year, President Trump is facing a new reality in Washington, dealing with divided government for the first time. Consequences just starting to play out with new investigations coming in the House, Robert Mueller preparing his report. And the watchword right now, stalemate. Day 16 of the government shutdown, no deal in sight to get 800,000 federal workers back to work and paid. The border wall promise that fueled Donald Trump's campaign has now stalled the government he leads. Placeholder talks at the White House on Saturday made no progress. Another meeting set later today. One big question on the table, will President Trump defy Congress by declaring a national emergency and ordering the military to build the wall he vowed Mexico would pay for? Let's take that now to one of Washington's newer power brokers, the incoming chair of the House Armed Services Committee.
And I will actually have a clip from the incoming chair of the House Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith of Washington, another Democrat, when I get to some of the newsmaker clips. But you saw there was a little more emphasis on the Mueller and House investigations there, like I said, even though it was a much shorter clip. And similar length news summary was from CNN's State of the Union, where Jake Tapper told us the State of the Union this week is incomplete dysfunction. And I think it's also a fairly good news summary, as I will talk about with you after we watch together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is in complete dysfunction. We are now in the 16th day of the partial government shutdown over the president's border wall, with no suggestion of any progress being made. Today, President Trump will travel to Camp David, where he will meet with senior staff before meetings with congressional staff on the shutdown are expected to continue. On Saturday, Vice President Mike Pence and senior members of the president's team met with congressional staff for negotiations, where the president later said, quote, not much headway was made. The impasse comes as President Trump is now dealing with a new political reality. Thursday, Democrats assumed control of the House, and Nancy Pelosi took the Speaker's gavel. This week, House Democrats plan on pushing legislation to fund individual parts of the federal government to attempt to pressure Republicans in Congress and the White House. Joining me now, acting White House Chief of Staff.
And I will have acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney. Like I said, two clips from both NBC and CNN. But I have two more news summaries to quickly show you. The next one is CBS's Face the Nation. My positive spin on the Face the Nation clip here is that I think that Margaret Brennan in this introduction actually it's the shortest of all the news summaries, but lays out the positions of the two sides, not the tripartite setup that Meet the Press gave you, but the Democrats versus the Trump administration, where Trump wants his $5 billion wall, and the Democrats want to reopen the government before they even talk about the wall. And Face the Nation, I think, delineates those two sides most clearly over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Top White House officials and senior congressional aides will meet again today to try to find a way out of the shutdown. So far, their talks have yielded nothing. Yesterday, the administration stuck to its demand for $5.7 billion to build a border wall. Democrats insisted the government needs to reopen while negotiations continue. With no deal in sight, trash is piling up at the nation's national parks, and some 800,000 federal workers won't receive paychecks until the government reopens. We begin today with Senate Democratic...
And you'll see that the consequences of the shutdown are also emphasized in a CBS Face the Nation clip I'll show a little bit later, in which Margaret Brennan is talking to... well, actually, in several of the clips, they emphasize some of the costs to both the workers and to regular Americans of this ongoing shutdown, including things like farm loans through the Agriculture Department, tax refunds I mean, it's not just the trash piling up. You saw in that last clip there of those 800,000 federal workers who aren't getting paid, and then there are contractors who may never get paid. So it's really affecting real people. And like I said, I thought that last clip delineated the two sides most clearly. The Fox News Sunday news summary, I think they tried to make the president look strong. This, as is often the case, the Fox News summary looks like it could have been produced by Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is the clip in the clip I'm going to show next, where she gets somewhat cross-examined by Chris Wallace, and I saw a lot of kudos going out to Chris Wallace for being such a tough journalist, but you'll see he doesn't really cross-examine her on something she says at the beginning of the clip after next I'm going to show you. Oh, I'm getting into like the clip after next instead of introducing the next clip, which, like I said, is Fox News Sunday, trying to make the president look strong. And if you listen carefully, I think Kevin Corke, who has his own video package, this is why this news summary is almost as long as NBC's Meet the Press. Well, at least twice as long as all the other news summaries, and half as long as NBC's Meet the Press. It's 2 minutes 15 seconds, because there is a video package like in the middle of this where Kevin Corke, or like Chuck Todd in the first news summary, they have pre-recorded their thoughts, and that makes it I don't know, it gives at least Kevin Corke more chance for spin, because if you listen carefully, there's one point where he says the reason for this standoff, or the reason for the shutdown, is because Democrats have taken power, and the prospects for any sort of resolution are dim because Democrats have decided to stand up to Trump, or there is sort of this subtle blaming of the Democrats, which I don't think is justified, but you can let me know what you think after we watch the final news summary before we get to the actual newsmaker clips to watch together over here.
Hello again from Fox News in Washington. President Trump now says the government shutdown could go on for months or even years. With the standoff over the border wall now in its third week, White House officials and congressional staffers met Saturday to work towards a deal. But prospects for a breakthrough remain dim as the new Democratic majority in the House seems determined to stand up to President Trump. In a moment, we'll speak with White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. But first, let's bring in Kevin Corke live at the White House with the latest on talks between the two sides. Kevin.
Chris, with no end to the shutdown in sight, top White House officials will join the president at Camp David today for a 2019 agenda strategy session. And as you can imagine, at the top of the list, ending the shutdown. From the Situation Room, Rose Garden, briefing and cabinet rooms, and this weekend, the Eisenhower Executive Office building. President Trump carefully crafted a forward-leaning posture during the shutdown this week. But for all the tweets, crime statistics, and letters to Congress imploring lawmakers to fund border security, including a wall, an ominous realization has cast a pall over the nation's capital. With no sign of movement in the negotiations, the partial government shutdown is unlikely to end anytime soon.
It's very hard to see how progress will be made unless they open up the government.
Now, 16 days into the shutdown, it is clear that despite increased face-to-face engagement, cooler heads haven't prevailed. In fact, the president turned up the heat, warning that he'd consider using a national emergency to get his wall funding if Democrats won't budge.
Absolutely. No, we can do it. I haven't done it. I may do it. I may do it.
So while the president stays here and then heads to Camp David, remaining in Washington will be Vice President Mike Pence. In fact, he'll be here conducting yet another working discussion with congressional Democrats who, of course, are here with their staffers, hoping to find a way, Chris, to end the shutdown.
Kevin Corke reporting from the White House. Kevin, thank you. And joining me now here in the studio, White House Press Secretary Sarah.
So, like I said, I think that news summary there was pretty soft on the Trump administration and the blame that Trump, I think, is more justified for calling it the Trump shutdown. If you've been watching for the last few weeks, you know that Trump actually had that 17-minute meeting with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in the Oval Office where he said he would take the blame for the shutdown. So I don't even know why Fox News tries to pass it off that way, but like I said before, I showed that clip and I mentioned multiple times that one of the big clips from the Sunday morning shows that's gotten a lot of play. I even saw Chris Wallace was trending on Twitter for being such a hard-hitting journalist for cross-examining Sarah Huckabee Sanders on this whole 4,000 terrorist statistic that the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, tried to float the other day, and that also President Trump himself has kind of touted. And Chris Wallace had done his homework, and he did do some good journalistic cross-examination in this clip. But I extended the clip a little bit, the introduction to the clip that you may not have seen, where Chris Wallace does bring up the consequences of the shutdown that I was talking about earlier, the tax refunds and some of the other things that, food stamps also are, there are, I believe, like 20 million children not going to get their food stamps if the shutdown drags on. So that's at the beginning of this clip. But then you'll see something that Chris Wallace lets just go right by that really stuck out to me in Sarah Huckabee Sanders' answer at the beginning of this clip. That one of the things about America that makes it the greatest country on earth is we're the only country that values life. Did you know that? The United States is the only country in the world that values life, according to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, without any cross-examination from Chris Wallace. He just, oh yeah, of course. Only Americans value life. That's what makes us so different and so great, according to the White House communications, the press secretary, White House press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, with no cross-examination by Chris Wallace, and then some good cross-examination from Chris Wallace in the second part of the clip that I'll discuss with you after we watch it together over here.
Drags on, not months or years, but even into February, it's going to start to hurt real people. Take a look at this, Sarah. Federal tax refunds will be delayed. Food stamps for 38 million Americans will be cut. Millions of people will lose rental assistance payments, and union leaders say hundreds of TSA workers are already off the job because they can't afford to get to work. President Trump thinks the border wall is worth all of that?
Look, the president certainly doesn't want any of those things to happen. But you know what else he doesn't want to see happen? He never wants to make a phone call like the one he made earlier this week where he spoke to Officer Singh of California's widow because an illegal immigrant came across our border and killed him in cold blood. That shouldn't happen in this country, particularly when we have things that we know can help prevent it. Every life, that's what sets America apart from every other country. We value life. It's what makes us unique. And the day that we stop doing that, even if it's 1, 10, or 100,000, 2000, that's when we stopped being the greatest country on the face of this earth. Not only people like that, but we also have a massive influx of drugs that come across the southern border. 90% of the heroin that comes into this country comes across through the southern border, and 300 Americans are killed from that every single month.
Let's talk.
To look at it across the board.
Let's talk about the wall, because there is no question that there has been a big spike in the number of family units coming across the border. The president talks about terrorists potentially coming across the border. And here is Secretary of Homeland Security Nielsen. Take a look.
CBP has stopped over 3,000 what we call special interest aliens trying to come into the country on the southern border. Those are aliens who the intel community has identified are of concern.
But special interest aliens are just people who come from countries that have ever produced a terrorist. They're not terrorists themselves, and the State Department says that there is, quote, their words, no credible evidence of any terrorists coming across the border from Mexico.
We know that roughly nearly 4,000 known or suspected terrorists come into our country illegally, and we know that our most vulnerable point of entry is at our southern border.
I know this statistic. I didn't know if you were going to use it, but I studied up on this. Do you know where those 4,000 people come, or where they're captured? Airports.
Not always, but
airports.
certainly a large number.
The State Department says there hasn't been any terrorists that they found coming across the southern border from Mexico. It's by air,
it's by land, and it's by sea. It's all of the above. But one thing that you're forgetting is that the most vulnerable point of entry that we have into this country is our southern border, and we have to protect it. And the more and more that individuals
they're not coming across the southern border, Sarah. They're coming and they're being stopped at airports.
They're coming a number of ways. They're certainly, I'm not disagreeing with you that they're coming through airports. I'm saying that they come by air, by land, and by sea. And the more and more that our border becomes vulnerable, and the less and less that we spend time and money protecting it, the more that we're going to have an influx, not just of terrorists, but of human traffickers, drug inflow, and people that are coming here to do American citizens harm.
Okay. The president now says, and this was...
So there you go. I think I pretty much criticized that clip because there is good cross-examination about the 4,000 terrorist number by Chris Wallace there. He did do his homework, although he did sort of let her not get away with never really admitting it was a big lie by, well, they're coming by land, sea, and air. Well, what do we need a wall for if they're coming by land, sea, and air, and if they're coming to our airports? And also, like I said before I showed the clip, there was that whole thing about America being the unique because we're the country that values life, unlike all those death-valuing countries all around the world. I don't know exactly. Must be Syria, because Syria is just sand and death. If I were, that's something President Trump said in a press conference earlier this week that didn't make any of the news summaries, but that was a pretty brutal description of Syria. There got to be some nice places in Syria, not just sand and death. But anyway, I guess that's one of those death-loving countries, unlike the United States, which apparently, according to the press secretary for the White House, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, is the unique country in the world that values life. That's what makes America great. Make America great by saying false things and disparaging other countries. I don't know. You can't make yourself feel great by putting all the other countries down. That's really that's like an inferiority complex, really. But anyway, I'm not going to psychoanalyze America like that, but that's my take on that last clip. And now I have 3 NBC Meet the Press clips that represent the tripartite positions on the wall that I talked about when I showed the news summary. This is first Mick Mulvaney, the acting Chief of Staff for the White House and also Director of the Office of Management and Budget, and also the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, to the extent that he took that position to destroy the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but that's a whole other issue. A bureau that was actually created by Elizabeth Warren, who announced her exploratory committee for president, something not really covered by any of the clips I chose, although it was covered briefly on some of the news programs. But getting off into tangents on tangents, and I have Mick Mulvaney and then Steny Hoyer, the House Majority Leader, second in command to Nancy Pelosi, and then the moderate Republican Susan Collins, one of the vulnerable Republicans, 20 vulnerable Republicans who are up for re-election in 2020, who might be the first to break on the whole shutdown. That's sort of the three different views of the shutdown and the wall. And here's Mick Mulvaney saying, oh, you know, it's not really the big, beautiful concrete wall. This is, you know, the steel slats compromise that you get from the Trump administration. 90 seconds from NBC's Meet the Press this morning, well, 87 seconds over here.
This issue.
Here's one thing that I didn't hear throughout our entire interview. What is the president?
You didn't ask.
What is the president offering the Democrats? What's the offer on their side? Right now, it only is clear what the president wants.
Let me tell you, because that came up the other day in the private meeting with the Big Eight, as they call them, the leaders in the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, was that he was willing to agree, and he mentioned this at the Rose Garden press conference, to take a concrete wall off the table. If that is not evidence of our willingness to solve the problem, okay? Because again, what's driving this is the president's desire to change the conditions at the border. And if he has to give up a concrete wall and replace it with a steel fence in order to do that, so that Democrats can say, see, he's not building a wall anymore, that should help us move in the right direction.
So you want the headline to be, the president no longer wants a wall. He wants a fence.
The president is going to secure the border with a barrier.
Would he say it that way? Would he say it? Is he comfortable saying, no, not going to have the wall, and by the way, Mexico's never paying?
I think he said yesterday it was going to be a 30-foot high steel. He actually tweeted a picture out of it 2 weeks ago. We told the Democrats this 2 weeks ago. This is what we want to build. Do you think this is a wall? Actually, under the way the law is written right now, technically it's not a wall. But if that's not evidence of the president's desire to try and resolve this, I don't know what is.
Mick Mulvaney, I think we ran over. Appreciate your time. The current Chief of Staff, you haven't given up your title. Let us know when you do.
It is always a pleasure.
And joining me now.
And so, yeah, that is the new offer and compromise from the Trump administration, to the extent you can trust anyone in the Trump administration making an offer who's not Trump, because that's one of the things that's happened in the last few weeks. Especially Vice President Mike Pence has made a couple offers that then Trump disavowed, including the bill passed by the Senate unanimously by voice vote to keep the government open till February 8th. You may remember that from a couple weeks ago. That was something Vice President Mike Pence said that Trump would support, and then Trump totally pulled the rug out from under him. And I don't know if Mick Mulvaney is giving a true offer here, but this whole thing about, well, it could be steel slats, not a concrete, big, beautiful concrete wall that Mexico's going to pay for, like Trump promised during the campaign. Is that a compromise? I don't know if it really is. And Steny Hoyer, the House Majority Leader, like I said multiple times, second in command to Nancy Pelosi, he was the immediate next guest on NBC's Meet the Press, and he responded directly to that offer, and I think in a way that I agree with, of course, being someone who comes from the left, being someone who is a registered Democrat, so not surprisingly, I am more on the Democrat side for reasons I will briefly explain after we watch Steny Hoyer explain it in this clip.
So, glad to be with you.
All right, let me start with that last. Mick Mulvaney said just now, you heard him, the president is taking concrete wall off the table. If that's not evidence that he was trying to compromise, then he don't know what is. Do you take that as a good faith offer?
It is an offer he made, and it'll be discussed. But the fact of the matter is, you used Mick Mulvaney's quote. But you've got Senator John Cornyn, who says, I don't think we're just going to be able to solve border security with a physical barrier, because people can come under, around it, and through it. Lindsey Graham said the border wall is probably not a smart investment. Mike McCall, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee in the last Congress said, you have to understand, too, that a 30-foot concrete wall is a very expensive proposition, and there are a lot of other things we can be doing technology-wise to make it a smart border that's more effective and more cost efficient. So this is not a Democratic position. This is a pretty broad position that this does not make sense. What we ought to do is open up the government first. And that's what we're going to do. We passed legislation last Thursday that would open up the government. I would hope that Senator McConnell would take the responsibility as the leader of the co-equal branch of government, the legislative branch, and send this to the president. That would open up government, would start serving the American people.
Do you regret not taking the deal that Vice President Pence offered, the ask for $2.5 billion and maybe?
So open up the government first, as you remember from the clearly delineated positions of the two sides rather than three sides that you saw from the CBS Face the Nation news summary. Open up the government first is the Democrats' current position, while $5 billion for Trump's wall, but now steel, not concrete. Steel slats. $5 billion for steel slats. That's currently the Trump administration position, and Steny Hoyer, I guess, did his homework as well, coming up with all those quotes, including the Mick Mulvaney quote and the John Cornyn quote, and basically the addition of wall funding is not really what's important for national security. That's, I mean, there's like 600 to 800 miles of the border where some sort of fencing or wall makes sense, and guess what? That's where there already is fencing or wall. That's why it's there. And you'll see in clips, I didn't take various Republicans and administration officials saying, well, where we have wall, it's been 90% effective and 95% effective, which is like a lie on a lie, because first of all, where there is wall, it's frequently breached. You can like go over the wall, you can go under the wall through tunnels, and you can break the wall, even if it's a steel wall or whatever. But the fact is, the reason there is wall in those places is because that's places where wall or fence would be effective. And there's pretty much wall and fence everywhere that wall or fence would be effective. And that's why the whole thing's ridiculous. And now the one thing in favor of the NBC Meet the Press tripartite arrangement, making noise over here, tripartite arrangement of positions is what might break this stalemate is if Mitch McConnell will put on the floor of the Senate one of these House-passed bills that reopens the government while negotiations go on for Homeland Security funding or wall funding or something in that direction. And what's going to put that pressure on the Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is the fact that there are more vulnerable Republicans up for re-election from the Senate in 2020, and that's sort of the introduction to this clip of Susan Collins is Chuck Todd explaining who the vulnerable Republicans are, or some of them, and then asking Susan Collins what she thinks about this whole steel versus concrete wall thing you saw from first Mick Mulvaney and then Steny Hoyer in the last two clips, and I will discuss that clip with you a little more after we watch together over here.
Susan Collins is used to being stuck in the middle these days, and now she has company. She's one of 6 Republican senators up in 2020 who are either from states that Hillary Clinton won or from states that could reasonably be called toss-up or swing states. Collins, along with Cory Gardner of Colorado and Tom Tillis in North Carolina, have already called for an end to the shutdown, wall or no wall. They're pressured on one side from Republicans who want to stand firm, and on the other side from Democrats and independents who are opposed to the idea of a wall and certainly to the idea of a shutdown for it. Susan Collins joins me now. Senator Collins, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you, Chuck.
Look, you were very patient. You heard Mick Mulvaney. You heard Steny Hoyer. These are the people in the room. Did you hear any hope?
I'm always hopeful. I have never thought that shutdowns are an appropriate means of trying to achieve any kind of solution. This isn't a matter of one side or the other caving in. It's a matter of getting to a compromise, and that's a sign of strength. And it's important that we remember that real lives are being affected here. The 800,000 federal employees, dedicated public servants, who won't get a paycheck next Friday if this isn't resolved very soon.
Is steel for concrete a reasonable compromise offer from the White House, in your mind?
Well, I've always thought that the debate over what the physical barrier should be constructed of was rather bizarre. We do need to strengthen our border security. We know that 90% of the heroin is coming across the southern border, along with human traffickers and a lot of unaccompanied children. That's not good either. But we need to look at more than just a physical barrier. We need to look at more Border Patrol agents, technology, and other means as well.
Let me ask you this. The Senate adjourned at 11.
So that's one of the moderate Republicans. You may remember how moderate Susan Collins was when it came to Brett Kavanaugh, which was just another Republican, as it turned out. But she does have to run for re-election in 2020, just like Cory Gardner in Colorado and Tom Tillis. And they're actually even more vulnerable Republican senators than you saw in that Meet the Press clip. By the way, one thing I forgot to say about the previous clip, the Steny Hoyer position, my favorite part of that clip that I forgot to mention before I showed it or after was when Chuck Todd's question to Steny Hoyer was, do you think this no longer doing the concrete wall and now doing a steel wall, is that a good faith offer from the Trump administration? And Steny Hoyer's answer to the question, is it a good faith offer, was, well, it's an offer. If you go back and watch the clip before last, you'll see that it's not. It's kind of a subtle diss, but it's there. Is it a good faith offer? It's an offer, and I kind of think that's true because, like I said before, where there's not really much need for additional wall and fencing, and that's the clip after next. I'm going to show you is Representative Adam Smith from Washington making that point. Talking to George Stephanopoulos. But I want to show one more Mick Mulvaney clip. I promised this earlier that I'd show both Chuck Todd and Jake Tapper asking questions of the acting chief of staff of the White House, Mick Mulvaney, in addition to his other jobs that I mentioned earlier on the budget and on Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Here is Jake Tapper calling Mick Mulvaney on basically a lie that Trump's been telling, that, you know, he's not the only one who wants a wall. There are other currently living former presidents, or I don't know, maybe George H.W. Bush, which makes no sense. But he's saying, they won't tell you this, but privately other presidents are saying, you go Trump, you get that wall. I wish I'd gotten that wall. And so Jake Tapper saying, well, who are these presidents? And Mick Mulvaney says, well, they supported wall funding in the past for, you know, places where wall might actually, or fencing might actually have been useful, but he totally dodges and tries to get away with not saying the Trump lie is a lie, as I will discuss with you after we watch that 75-second clip together over here.
The president.
I want to ask you, President Trump, trying to drum up support for the wall, on Friday said that some past U.S. presidents have told him that they should have built a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border previously. Spokespeople for George W. Bush and Bill Clinton said that that wasn't their boss that said that. Neither Barack Obama nor Jimmy Carter have ever endorsed the idea of a border wall. Who exactly was he talking about?
My guess is this boils down to some of the semantic difficulties we had with Leader Schumer just yesterday. Okay? Mr. Schumer kept saying, you don't have money for a wall now. You don't have money for a wall now. And we're showing pictures of what we're building on the border with the money that we received last year.
It's a very similar style to what the president wants to build in the future. It's the steel, what they call a bollard fence. It's a 30-foot high steel barrier. And our understanding is that that's not a wall in the law. Right now, the law actually limits our use of concrete, for example, on the border. And we're like, that's fine. That's completely fine. So I'm not really sure.
You don't know what president it was, though?
No, I don't know what the presidents mean when they said they weren't supporting a wall. I know that George Bush was president in 2006 when they signed the Secure Fence Act, which is what we're using right now to build the wall.
But which one told him? Which presidents told?
I have no idea.
You don't know?
So, no, I haven't asked the question. Have not asked the president that question.
I want to ask you, President Trump said he's considering using...
Good for him. He didn't ask the president the question, which former president is privately supporting this wall, because then he would have known that Donald Trump lied. Another lie from Donald Trump? What is it, like he averages 15 lies a day or something? I don't know. I've seen various different statistics, but I don't know why I should even concentrate on that specific lie, because there are so many lies. I could go on for hours and hours just covering the Trump lies. There's like lies behind the lies, and the whole thing, like I said, was based on the idea that the fact that Democrats and others have supported walls or fences in places in the past means that they should support the additional funding for walls where walls don't make sense now. And like I said before I showed that clip, the next clip I'm showing is Representative Adam Smith from Washington, the incoming House Armed Services Chair. And here he is talking to George Stephanopoulos. He had some interesting things also to say about Trump's claim that he can declare a national emergency and use the military to build the wall. And I didn't take that clip. That's down in the video description. There's a link to the whole ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos program. But here he is talking about what I've been saying multiple times through these last several clips, that we don't need a wall where we don't have a wall, or fencing or whatever. Talking to George Stephanopoulos about the whole steel wall versus concrete wall non-issue over here.
White House Chief Mick Mulvaney now say the president is willing to give on a concrete wall. He wants it to be steel instead. Are they giving you something you can work with there?
No, I mean, because the president really doesn't understand the issue. And actually, there was a great quote from Mulvaney from a couple years ago, where he said, he was critical of then candidate Trump's comments about a wall, saying, look, a wall is sort of a childish response to the problem. If you understand what's happened in border security, we've like quintupled the border security budget in the last 15 years. And by the way, it's been fairly effective, but we've invested in border patrol agents. We've invested in drones, in airplanes, in sensors, in technology. A concrete barrier is not going to automatically stop people from coming.
Democrats have supported some barriers, and the president's out tweeting this morning. He said, he's quoting Senator Barack Obama in 2005, "We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked." And then I voted when I was a senator to build a barrier to try to prevent illegal immigrants from coming in. That's Hillary Clinton. So you voted for barriers in the past. So any concern that this hard line is going to backfire?
Well, no, and that's the point. The wall is not in itself a bad idea. It's just, it's been done. And what the president has not done is he has not made the case that on the portions of the border where a wall has not been built, how is a wall going to actually enhance border security? There is no evidence whatsoever that that's necessary, and yet he's willing to shut down the government and stop paying Border Patrol agents, and in many cases, stop all the efforts that we have made to enhance border security over a campaign promise. And a campaign promise, as you pointed out, that Mexico was supposed to pay for. He is shutting down the government to break his signature campaign promise. His signature campaign promise was that the taxpayers weren't going to have to pay for it.
Let's talk about the broader agenda.
So good on Representative Adam Smith there for bringing up the Mexico is supposed to pay for it part, and also making the point in response to George Stephanopoulos' question that the people who supported wall or fencing in the past were supporting it where it made sense, and that's pretty much done now. And you did see there's some George Stephanopoulos, that tweet from Trump about Obama and Hillary Clinton supporting border security in the past. I think that may be where Trump got his whole thing, like past presidents are telling me. It's really like quotes he dug up, or, well, I don't know. Who knows what is behind the falsehoods that Trump comes up with, but I just wanted to point that out. Additionally, I have two more clips. That was a very reasonable, non-crazy analysis from a Democrat. I don't know why it is that Lindsey Graham feels he has to be so out there, alternative reality, and also name calling. He calls the Democrats crazy. He says the whole, we can't negotiate now. We can't get like a deal on DACA. Remember, DACA is deferred action on childhood arrivals. That's like the people who are brought here as children in undocumented status by their parents through no fault of their own. A lot of them don't speak the language of their home countries. They've grown up here. They're, if they're in college or in the military or working, there's no reason to disrupt their lives. And so, anyway, that's who Lindsey Graham's saying they can make a deal, but the Democrats have to stop being crazy. Like, who is the crazy one in this whole situation? Is it the Democrats or is it Trump? Well, or is it Lindsey Graham? He's seems to be he's almost like frothing at the mouth in this 2-minute, 17-second clip from CBS's Face the Nation. My one criticism of Margaret Brennan, she keeps bringing up the Rose Garden, and it's an important point for reasons I'll discuss after we watch the clip, but she keeps. I didn't even take all the places she brought up the Rose Garden. I cut it down a little. It's only 2 minutes, 17 seconds, which I will discuss with you. The penultimate news clip of the night over here.
Because that's significant, what you said there. If you think the president is indeed open to a DACA for wall trade here, because he stood in the Rose Garden the other day and said, no, you got to wait till the court rules, and we're some time out from that.
Okay, here's what he's open to. He's open to getting his wall money. We need $5 billion for the wall in light of the increased threats. He has always put on the table, he put 1.8 million illegal immigrants having a pathway to citizenship in his own plan. So how can you say he's not open-minded to it? Here's what I think the deal would look like. Give him the money we need to secure our border, and $5 billion, $5, $6 could be well spent, and I think we can put on the table TPS reform. There's 400,000 people going to lose their legal status soon who've been here for decades. I'd like to deal with that problem.
When is that going to be put on the table, that offer?
I think we'll have offers on the table when we find somebody that's not crazy to deal with. We're not going to put any offers on the table as long as people in charge of these negotiations accuse all of us who want a wall of being a racist and see our Border Patrol agents as gassing children. Until you can get that crowd put to the sidelines, I don't see anything happening.
You've worked with the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, on criminal justice reform. He is cited as someone open to the deal you described of DACA for wall. But the president really seemed to shoot that down in the Rose Garden the other day.
I am here
when
to tell
would
you,
we see that put on the table? That's a bigger immigration overhaul than what we're talking about right now, which is simply the wall.
When you see Dick Durbin and others in the room, not a bunch of staffers, when you see this rhetoric that those who want to build a wall are racist, stop. When you see the idea $1 is enough for the wall, when that stuff ends, the real negotiations begin. Right now, the people running the show on the left are radical, liberal Democrats who don't see a border security problem. They see their own government being the problem, not the illegal immigrant. Until that changes, we'll never get anywhere. There's a deal to be had here, but it will include a wall. And if there's no wall in this deal, we'll never have a deal.
I want to ask you about Syria.
So if there's no wall in this deal, there's never going to be a deal. Lindsey Graham is a hardliner, and he's like one of Trump's most avid supporters after calling him basically crazy when he was running against him for president. What is behind that transformation? I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But painting the Democrats as the crazy ones in this negotiation, that just doesn't make it. I don't know what justification Lindsey Graham has for that. If you watched all those news summaries, if you've been watching Trump and how he has been erratic and almost using like the crazy man theory of the madman theory of negotiation that I think they discussed on one of the Sunday morning news analysis shows. that supposedly Nixon subscribed to, that, oh, he's like so crazy and out of control, you have to be the reasonable ones, and that's like the whole strategy that Trump is playing. I don't know, but Lindsey Graham seems to be saying, no, it's the Democrats who are the crazy ones. That doesn't make sense to me. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section, what that's all about with Lindsey Graham. But this whole thing could be a distraction, and you saw at the very end of that clip, Margaret Brennan started to ask Lindsey Graham about Syria, and you may remember I showed a Lindsey Graham clip last week where he said he was about to go to lunch with Trump and talk to him about Syria and the immigration Trump shutdown border wall situation. And when he came out from that lunch with Trump, he didn't really have that much more commitment, but he seems to be out there trying to negotiate anyway on the immigration border wall situation, like you saw in that last clip. On Syria, Trump seems to be switching things around, but there's also this kind of scary side that people in the military keep resigning. There was a breaking news that the chief of staff at the Pentagon, Sweeney, I think his name was, he resigned, and that was something you're going to see in this final news clip. Sandy and Dash right here before the Sandy and Dash clip, because Sandy and Dash are both in the room here. But this is Adam Schiff talking about that scary part about there being no like adults in the room, and then also about how Trump is talking as if he is getting Soviet or pro-Soviet Russian propaganda in his ear, was one of the weird things from Trump's press conference. And I'll discuss all that with you after we watch this final 3.5-minute news clip together. Jake Tapper talking to Representative Adam Schiff, the incoming House Intelligence Committee chair. Over here.
A source just told me this morning that the Trump White House, quote, forced out Pentagon Chief of Staff Rear Admiral Kevin Sweeney. Here's what Samantha Power, the former ambassador to the United Nations under President Obama, tweeted last night about Admiral Sweeney's departure. Quote, it is January 5th, 2019. We have no Secretary of Defense and now no Department of Defense Chief of Staff, no Attorney General, and no evident guardrails in Trump's inner circle. The president is unhinged. Even GOP zealots know it. Republicans inside and outside the administration must stop enabling Trump and protect America, unquote. That's a rather stark picture of the Trump administration. Do you agree with that view?
I largely do agree that all of the adults are one by one being forced out of the room. Anyone that had the standing or the independence to speak out to the president, to tell the president what he needed to hear, not what he wanted to hear, has been pushed aside. And now you have a lot of yes people serving the president. And with this kind of a president who is as impulsive as he is, who makes up claims out of whole cloth, and you talked earlier today about the astonishing claim that the Soviets invaded Afghanistan to fight terror. That's not something you say out of frustration. That's a Kremlin talking point. And if he doesn't have anyone who will tell him, Mr. President, that's flat out wrong. Where are you getting this from? And Mr. Mulvaney may review the documents that come to the president's desk. He doesn't get to review every phone call the president makes and who's whispering in the president's ear. Someone is giving him these ideas about Montenegro and about, what the Soviets invaded Afghanistan for, what's being presented in the Duma right now is the Russian point of view. So it is deeply concerning. Republicans in Congress do need to speak out. History is going to hold them accountable, and now is the time.
I want to ask you about a comment from your fellow Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib this week. The Democrats need to, quote, impeach the mother effer, referring to President Trump. Forgetting the language for a second, her comments underscore the desire of Democrats to impeach President Trump. 80% of Democratic voters want the president to be impeached. How much pressure do you feel to take action against President Trump, even if you personally aren't there yet in terms of any evidence?
Well, first of all, Jake, I'm in a unique position to say this, considering the president made my last name a profanity. This president is not in a position to talk about the use of language. Nobody has done more to debase the political sphere, the public square, than Donald Trump. But in terms of the merits of impeachment, we need to see what Bob Mueller has to say. And I really think it's premature for Democrats to be talking about what the remedy ought to be before we know the full body of evidence. And that's what I've urged our colleagues to do all along. It's what I'm going to continue to urge them. And I think that's where, frankly, my constituents are. That's what I hear from them. They understand that, yes, it's, theoretically possible you could line up the votes in the House. But what's the point if you don't know the full case and you can't make the case to the Senate? And in particular, it has to be a bipartisan process. If the Republican senators, some of them, are not on board, then all you have is a failed impeachment. And I don't see how that benefits the country.
I understand you've made a decision about what the first public hearing.
Oh, and the first public hearing that Adam Schiff is going to hold in the clip that I didn't show there is on the rise of authoritarianism around the world. And that's actually kind of a smart angle on sort of like going up against Trump without really making about Trump, things that might even bring some Republicans on board, because some Republicans don't understand why Trump is being so soft on like Saudi Arabia, on Turkey, on all sorts of stuff. And I also, there was one little nugget there that I didn't mention in the preview of that last clip where I really enjoyed Adam Schiff getting to comment on the impeach the MFer comment from the new member of Congress that got caught on video saying that. And he said, well, Trump can't really criticize someone for using bad language since he called little Adam Schiff, changed his name into a profanity. So anyway, for those who were wondering what happened to the Russia investigation, what happened to the Mueller investigation, why wasn't that in the topic at all? Well, there's a little bit of a preview, and that some of that's going to come from Adam Schiff. And earlier in that interview with Jake Tapper, he mentioned some of the transcripts he'd be sending over to Robert Mueller and some of his other thoughts about the investigation. That's all down in the video description. That is the last of my news clips. I appreciate those of you who have joined me for this live show. I've been kind of rushing through because I'm worried I'm going to lose power again. There's a big storm here. But I do appreciate those live viewers. Here are the Super Chat contributors. So yeah, that's awesome. I really appreciate those people who support me through the Super Chat contributions. My monthly patrons on Patreon, there's a link down in the video description for that. And also to give me one-time contributions through PayPal. I did also promise a bonus Dash and Sandy clip, which I have to import here. I forgot to import it. But this shows you the storm that's going on out here. Sandy's right over there like snoring now, but this was earlier when she was asleep in her bed, and Dash thought he wanted to go outside till I opened the door, and it was so windy and rainy out there. He said, never mind. As you can see over in this bonus Dash and Sandy clip over here. So there you go. Thanks for joining me on this rainy, windy Sunday here, at least in Sacramento. I don't know what the weather is like or what time it is where you are around the world, but I will be back next Sunday and for every Sunday for the foreseeable future, giving you my best commentary and criticism of the best clips I can pick out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows. I think that things are going to be heating up, and it's going to be a crazy bumpy ride for the rest of 2019. I think that I am going to be covering at least impeachment hearings, if not actual impeachment. We'll see how things go, when the Mueller report comes out, February, March, April, May. So I've heard different estimates. That's what we have to look forward to, and I look forward to hosting another show next Sunday and interacting with all of you. And until then, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.